This podcast is sponsored by Ramp. Are you the decision maker in your company? Consider this. For the first time in decades, there's a better option for a corporate card and spend management platform. Meet Ramp, the only corporate card and spend management system designed to help you spend less money so you can make more. Most corporate credit cards offer points as incentives, but those points amount to less than their worth in real cash value. Ramp's corporate cards offer you cash back, real money in your pocket. Plus, you control who spends what with each vendor. And Ramp's software collects and verifies receipts automatically, which means you'll stop wasteful spending and close your books in hours instead of days. Businesses that use Ramp add up to 5% to their bottom line the first year. If you're a decision maker, adding Ramp could be one of the best decisions you've ever made. And now get $250 when you join Ramp. Just go to ramp.com/easy. Ramp.com/easy. RAMP.com/easy.
Cards issued by Sutton Bank and Celtic Bank, members FDIC. Terms and conditions apply.
Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. We've talked with Kac Young before. She has a doctorate in clinical hypnotherapy, natural healing, and naturopathic medicine. And she has been prolifically active, writing a lot of books, 25, I believe, is the count now. KacYoung.com, that's the website. The newest book that we're talking about right now is Living the Faery Life. She gives the background, historical background for belief in fairies, but she also includes some personal experiences, and that's why I wanted to talk to her about this. So, Living the Faery Life, my guest, Kac Young, Wendy's Coffee House.
Playing with fairies is very fun, and everybody can create a little fairy circle in their garden if they want to. They can just acknowledge fairies. You can even make a fairy door if you want. It is something very beautiful about acknowledging that there is another realm and that we aren't just the end-all and be-all of life, that there's something beyond. And maybe if we let them into our life, we might be enriched ourselves.
Hi, Kac. I'm so glad we're talking about fairies because with everything else that's going on, the weather, the entire world state, this is such a nice diversion. In all these centuries of fairies, we're still learning new things, and people are just beginning to say, my gosh, this might be real. So thank you. I'm glad you're here.
Oh, thank you. It's always lovely to be with you. We always have such a grand time. It's a gift for me to be able to talk to you, Wendy.
Living the Faery Life, the book. But I wanted to say recently I got the little nod, the little nudge to do lapis lazuli as a stone. And I thought, okay, Kac's book, where is it? And then I'm looking at the fairy book, and it's in there too, working with stones. So there's all across the board stuff that once you get into this, you can see how many threads connect to other elements. You're really going into more of the metaphysical element with fairies. So how did what was the prompt for this?
What happened is that I was pitching some books to Brenda Knight at Mango Publishing. And she said, yeah, well, I like that, but would you write a book on fairies? And I said, sure, why not? You know, you kind of hear that door open and you think, I walk through it, how bad could this be? And then I thought, well, I'm Irish. Yes, I believe in fairies. I've seen and dealt with ghosts, and I live very comfortably in two realms, on Earth and cosmically. So, sure, I'll write about fairies. And then, Wendy, the book wrote itself through me. It took me 5 weeks to write this book, and I couldn't stop writing it. I found that I pulled up information from, well, it's got to be past lives or some other kind of an area. I pulled up that information. I did my research. Usually books, it takes me quite a while to research because I like to put the science in. I like to put proof in. I like to back things up so that it's a scholarly work. Mm-hmm. Well, with fairies, it just came to me. I mean, it just flooded my entire being, and it connected for me a lot of other dots magically. That's why I've added essential oils, and I've added the plants, and I've added crystals, because to me, it's all the same. It is an energy that is out there that we can tap into. And fairies are magical beings. They are, well, they're legendary creatures and mythical for a lot of people, but they are supernatural little beings, and we have to open ourselves up to dwell in that realm, to play in that realm. And that's what my book is about. It's about if you would like to tap into fairy magic in the fairy world, all you have to do is just open your mind, open your eyes, and invite them in. And there's protocol. You just can't say, oh, yeah, fairies are going to do it my way. No. Fairy world is...
Yeah, well, good luck.
Yeah, good luck with that. Fairies are different. They're little beings. They're from a different time, a different place, a different dimension. But we can have a great deal of fun with them, and they add to your life. They add joy. They add the sense of magic. They add all the things that we get bogged down, especially when we're in a deep freeze. They can bring all of that. So I just had the best time writing this book.
The other thing too is you preface it with actually having experience where you're in the middle of fire country and you watched the neighbor's house burn down as you're thinking, well, mine did too, and then lo and behold, there was a little surprise, and you attribute that to some help.
Well, I do. I had a little fairy door and a little fairy garden. I don't know. It's just something that I created, and we had 11 minutes to get out of our house with 7 animals. So we left with nothing on. I mean, just a nightgown and slippers. And I grabbed my phone, the charger, and a purse, and crammed all 7 carriers into the car and left, in the middle of the night. So it was very harrowing. And I watched the next day on camera at the motel, which we finally got into at 5 o'clock in the morning. I watched our neighbor's house burn down, and as the camera panned left, I saw that our eaves were on fire. And I thought, okay, there goes the house. Well, I snuck back into the neighborhood 2 days later, and I was able to see that my house had not burned down. The orchard in the back had burned down, but sitting there in the garden where I had the fairy stone circle and the little fountain for the fairies and the fairy door was untouched. Behind it had burned down, but that was untouched, and the house was untouched except for one side back wall and part of the garage. But we really didn't lose anything, and everywhere around us there were still embers smoldering and houses gone all the way around it. There wasn't a structure in sight. Yeah. Our next door neighbors in a little cul-de-sac were a little bit more protected, but it was an awesome feeling to stand there and see nothing but this little purple door and all this burning stuff around us. It was amazing. And so that really, it brings it home on, some people would just chalk that up to, just coincidence. It was a dumb little door. No, I think it was powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it gives me goosebumps because the word for it is magical, because we can't, there's no context for how this works in our reality, but it works. And that's why when you're in the presence of that, it's like, oh my gosh, this is real. For me, at least that's how I feel. It's like when I see something and experience something that way, it brings it into my frame of reference as, wow, there's something else going on here, and we may not be able to describe it. We can sure experience it.
Well, and that's the whole genesis of fairies. I mean, African tribes, Asian folks, they all have their own form of fairies because they had to create something that explained the unusual, the magical. And so every culture has a theory about their own fairies. The Africans have the Azizi, and they are the beneficial fairies. And the Malaysians have Pari-Pari, who are motherly creatures that come and help you when you are in need. So every culture has them. And being Irish, I've studied a lot of Celtic lore and Celtic mythology, and I'm very familiar with all how that works. And my second favorite place on earth is to be in Ireland, and I've been there 7 or 8 times. So I really, I understand the culture at the soul level. So I know that the fairies exist, and I have chosen the Tuete Denan, the Side, as the main story for the Western world of how we really experience fairies and why they are underground or they became people of another place rather than on Earth. They originally were on Earth, and then they were banished. But that's just because of some cultures come in and overtake other cultures, and so they go somewhere and they dwell under and over us, and that's really easy to explain and see.
And then the language, the phrase that you used, I want you to explain that, but we have to take a quick break, okay? So this is going to be like the little tease to what's coming up next. Wendy's Coffee House, my guest, Kac Young, and KacYoung.com is her website. Living the Faery Life. And the question is, would you write a book on fairies? Your answer, sure, why not? Back in a few. Wendy's Coffee House. My guest is Kac Young, KacYoung.com, that's the website. Living the Faery Life is the book. How you can connect with fairies, what to do and what not to do around fairies. But it's also personal. Kac includes some of her own experiences, and we'll get into one of those in just a minute. She also includes in this other ways to connect with fairies, and that has to do with certain kinds of crystals, certain scents, like aromatherapy, different kinds of scents attract them. Nature is a very crucial element, and you heard that in the last break. So this is a peek at what's coming up with one of her personal experiences with fairies.
She was absolutely connected. And I realized, that was a fairy. An entity, a very magical entity, had transformed into that squirrel to be near us for whatever reason that was.
Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio, talking fairies. Yes, okay. I'm one of these people who I have a lot of experiences. Fairies is one of the things I have in my arsenal of, yes, been there, done that, and they're so cool. But it's something that when it happens, you can't prove it to anybody else unless they have some kind of an aptitude or, let's suspend disbelief and just see what happens. So when you're talking about these stories, we're hearing from somebody firsthand who says, this is what's happened for me. And that with your house, walking into the backyard, that garden, and seeing it still standing, that's magical.
Yes.
And again, my guest is Kac Young, website, KacYoung.com. The book we're talking about right now is Living the Faery Life. There was other stuff going on. You talked about in the book about the one that you had the experience with that you considered a fairy relationship with a squirrel. And this is a different element, a different aspect of connecting with nature that also brings that fairy element in. Do you think the squirrel was a fairy, or was it just that way of opening you up to other things?
Well, I do think the squirrel was a fairy. Originally, I didn't. I thought it was just a squirrel. But then the squirrel would appear at the most amazing times and would take part of our life at amazing times. And the squirrel was always there whenever there was like a challenge going on or something we were worried about. The squirrel, we named her Helen Keller because she was blinded in one eye. So her life was a little bit more difficult than most, but I think she let that happen or caused that in some way so that we would pay particular attention to her. And Helen had her definite likes and dislikes, and she would let us know that. I mean, I had my friends up from Los Angeles, and this is when I lived in Cambria, about 4 hours north of where I am now, and we lived on 2 acres worth of 80-foot Cambria pines and beautiful old oaks. So it was really amazing. We had a fox there. We had a lot of turkey. And the squirrels were always around, jumping around. And we loved that. But Helen came up close. She came on the deck. She let me know that she liked a particular kind of peanut and nothing else. She'd throw everything else away. She wouldn't eat it. And, none of those biscuits, thank you very much. And she came to, my friends from Los Angeles came up and we did a 25th wedding anniversary celebration for them. And it was just a very few people. And Helen sat outside the door with all these people, and we gave her a piece of cake because she wanted to be part of this celebration. And it was so amazing because nobody had seen a squirrel eat wedding cake before.
No.
But And she loved it, and she had it all over her house, and she was very proud. And I have pictures. So, But when Helen lived there for, I think, maybe 3-4 years, and we saw her every day, and she would knock on the windows, and she would follow us around the house on the deck. She was amazing. And she got in the house once, and then I realized, that's probably not a good idea because I do have cats. So let's keep her outside. And she came to say goodbye the day that she was leaving this planet. She spent the whole day, and she made sure that we saw her, and she put her hand up on the window, and then she simply just went down the stairs. By this time, she was getting old and feeble, and, I wanted to help her. I wanted to help her. But you can't, and we just felt very sad because we thought, well, Helen, if you have to go away, that's fine. So we had a little ceremony for her, and we wished her well in the next world and told her she's welcome back anytime. Yeah. And we even have a little icon in the window. We now have a fairy door inside and one outside as well. But by the fairy door, we have an icon of Helen Keller.
And see, that is just so beautiful. Just that the empathy you have, the compassion. There's a very strong sense of that connection with the emotion of her presence, and knowing that, right there, that especially showing up for a wedding and saying, okay, where's the cake?
Yeah. And I mean, she just was always part of the family. She was always, once she claimed us, once we said, okay, Helen, what do you need? Once we gave her the kind of food she wanted and the kind of treatment, and we said hello to her. But, if she didn't get the good night, if she didn't get she'd make sure she tracked us until she got us to say good night to her. She was absolutely connected. And I realized, that was a fairy.
Yeah.
An entity, a very magical entity, had transformed into that squirrel to be near us for whatever reason that was. But she brought joy. She brought laughter. She brought love. She brought stopping down and smelling the roses. That's what she brought. That was her job. And she did it day after day until she couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah. Okay. Now, earlier in the other break, you mentioned something. Was it a Gaelic phrase that you used?
Oh, well, I was talking about the Tuatha Dé Danann, which is a group, which is a peoples in Ireland they were also known as Sidé, the Shining Ones. They are the fairy culture. They are the fairy race that we talk about now.
Okay. See, because that's all, well, technically, that's all Greek to me, kind of. Whether it's Gaelic or Irish or whatever, I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not the only one who didn't quite go there. So with that though, that's old school phrase, and you're bringing it forward and saying this is what we're dealing with, right?
Yeah, this is how it really happened for the Western world. This is how. The rest of it is kind of mythology. The rest of the world stories about fairies are kind of mythology and created stories to explain the mysterious. But this one is how the people got to where they are, as far as I'm concerned. And then I've done the research on all of this to see, because I like to give people a background. I like to say, hey, this isn't just somebody sitting in their backyard figuring out,
yes.
An idea. This is historically proven that people believed in this, and here's why. So then I just make the extrapolation that this makes sense for our modern world. And it could be wrong. It could be, anybody could tell their own story, but this seems to be the right direction.
Well, you've done a lot of research trying to connect the dots. And so that is in the beginning of the book, that's where you set it up and say, all right, these are the cultures, these were their names, and this is how it worked into their history, their everyday going about their business, and what happens when this happened. All right. But from there were some other things that happened for you. And I want to get into the apple people. This is another version, I think, that happened that deals with fairies, and sometimes we tend to lump everything in the same pot because we don't have the language and we don't know the background, so we would just call it a poltergeist or a ghost or a residual haunting where there's an element there that's stirring the pot because it needs help. You actually went to some what we would consider some experts for help with a paranormal group from the local school. So we're going to come back and talk about the Apple people, because this is also another way they connect, and we would have no clue if we didn't have the language. My guest, Kac Young.
Yes.
Okay, right? Is that
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Kac Young and Living the Faery Life on her website. Check it out, kacyoung.com. The books are available at Amazon, wherever books are sold. And you can also follow along on my blog, wendyscoffeehouse.com. If you miss parts of the show, check it out in the archives, Wendy's Coffee House on Audio Boom. Okay, I can't help it. This is about the Apple people, okay? So just a little teeny tiny itty bitty preview.
So I was working at the dining room one night, and I sensed an entity, and I looked over to the left into the living room, and there was an apparition. There was something there, and it was white, and it had blue light around it, and I could see through it, but I could also see that it has the features of a face. And, of course, I went, yeah!
Back in a few. Wendy's Coffee House. Wendy's Coffee House, Kac Young, kacyoung.com. And I love the website because on the website it says you are a masterpiece. We know that, but do you? Okay, it's like in your face, yes, hey, get a clue. I love that. It's like, yeah. Quit hiding from yourself, you know? Yeah, well, that's it, you know? And this is what allows that, though. Dealing with these kinds of experiences and saying, maybe there's more to this than somebody's imagination. That's what happened when you got the Apple people. So I'm going to let you tell that story.
All right. So I had a roommate in college, and we had an apartment off campus in Los Angeles. Her Judas mother bought us a little set of Apple dolls at some little craft clinic or something that she went to. And there was an old little grandfather and an old little grandma, and they were seated on this little wooden bench made out of popsicle sticks, and there they were. And the Apple dolls are, someone takes an apple and they carve it, they peel it, and then they carve it, and they wait for it to age, and then it becomes dehydrated. And once it's dehydrated, they dress it up. So of course it's a grandma and a grandpa because it's all wizened and all dried up, and there you go. So they put hair on it and little hats and all that, and these two little people. And she brought them in to us. CJ was her name, and she brought them in to us, and I sort of went, ew, those are kind of strange, you know? There they are, and we put, oh, look how fabulous, and so we put them over, in the dining room. So I was working at the dining room one night, and I sensed an entity, and I looked over to the left into the living room, and there was an apparition. There was something there, and it was white, and it had blue light around it, and I could see through it, but I could also see that it has the features of a face. And of course, I went, yeah, and said, oh my God. So I told my roommate when I got home, and she went, oh, well, it was probably just a poltergeist. And I said, you know about these things? She said, well, yeah. I mean, yeah, it was probably just a poltergeist. We lived in an older home, a duplex in Hollywood, and so she was fine with that. Okay, so then it happened a few more times, and she was never home to see it, only me. So I had a friend, I was working on a television show with Steve Allen at the time, and so I told a friend about this, and she connected me up with the University of Irvine that had a parapsychological department. And I called them, left a message, and said, hi, you don't know me, but I think I have a poltergeist in my home. Can I talk to somebody? Well, they called me back. We had this conversation. Eventually, somebody came out, checked out the place, brought some little meters, those little meters, and said, well, there's definitely a presence. There's definitely something. All right, long story short, when I moved, we were done with college, and she moved somewhere, and I moved into my own apartment. I took one of the Apple dolls. She took the other one, and I saw the poltergeist in my new place. I called Irvine, and I said, do poltergeists move? And they said, no, not really. So we had a few back and forth conversations, and then the final conversation, they said, it's probably a fairy. A fairy?
Mm. Yeah.
A fairy? Okay. So then I started talking to it, and then I began to have conversations with the dolls, because at that point, I took one doll and Judith took the other, and then pretty soon she brought the doll back and said, well, they better be together. So we kept them together. And then I had a few more visitations. These little fairy people, once they got together, they amped up their power, see? So then a shoe that I needed would be gone for a day or two, and then I'd find it in the middle of the dining room table. This is the same dining room table that I was working at the other apartment just a few blocks away. You know, the wood, I don't know what the correlation was, but they even took my diamond earrings one time and hid them in a very obscure place. So I was always on the lookout, and Wendy, I basically had to have a meeting with them and say, look, this is all cute, and I don't mind it, but if you can't take any of my business stuff, you can't take my stopwatch because I work in control rooms and I time things, and you can't take any of my scripts. You cannot mess with the stuff that, you know, pays my rent. But, you know, I mean, the rest of it's cute. And then I relaxed, okay? Then once I had spoken my piece, everything became really easy. And they would play with things. They would take things. I would find scarves twisted around. I would find lipstick on the mirror. You know, oh yeah, okay, fine. So I began to really just live with fairies.
Missing things, like all of a sudden when you lost those diamond earrings and they had turned up in a really, really, really obscure, no one will ever believe that spot, that can be a little bit annoying because you don't know how long it's going to take before they bring it back.
Yes, and it was. And then, but once I straightened all that out, once I accepted them, the day I accepted them as fairies, they stopped pulling, you know, annoying pranks.
they would cute pranks.
Cute pranks. Yeah. They went from annoying to cute.
Where are Grandpa and Grandma Apple now?
Well, unfortunately, after years and years and years, the apples just completely, totally disintegrate. So all of a sudden, their heads fell off, and they didn't have any more heads. And so, you know, I buried them. I left them in a very nice burial place. And, you know, I mean, the apple doll sitting there without an apple head kind of didn't make a lot of sense.
No. Okay. That even sounds like, morbid. Okay.
Yeah. M for morbid. Yes. So, but I gave them a nice burial. I did that because I respected that they had been the home for some fairy energy.
Mm-hmm. From all of this, in your book, you actually go into how to connect with fairies and what that's like and their rules. And I like the one, don't dance. Okay, don't dance with them because that's not good.
No, because, see, they dance differently. See, they grew up in a different time and place, and they think and speak in different thoughts and words. So that's why I wrote, you know, this book, because, yeah, you don't say directly thank you to a fairy because it acknowledges in their language that you owe them something in return. So you say other things, you frame phrases. And here's what's fun, is it takes us off automatic and it puts us into another world. It's like going back, I don't know, into Chaucerian England or something, because you really have to say, I want to connect with them, so let me speak their language. And speaking their language is just not words, it's also the way that they think. So you don't dance with a fairy because dance to them is like sacred. Their dances are ritualistic and they are sacred. And if you dance with them, then you become one of them. And you don't want to become one of them unless you do. But if you want to stay who you are, then you would allow them to dance and praise them for their dancing. But you don't want to join in. The same thing about if a fairy offers you something to drink or something to eat, don't take it because they like, for example, to drink their beverages out of a foxglove blossom, and foxglove is poisonous to us. So you never know what natural ingredient they're going to be making their things out of, and their bodies are all attuned differently to these flowers and plants than we are. So we don't want to ingest anything that could be dangerous to us, but we can offer them things that we know are harmless and non-toxic. Sometimes the fairies may want to trick you, and it's not an evil trick. They do not start out wanting to harm you. They only start out wanting to be part of your life and to be accepted. Mm-hmm. us who makes them the enemy or treats them badly or insults them, calls them names, or in some way belittles them. And so then the fairies will come back and act out, not in revenge, but in response.
I would say that they are trying to teach you the lesson of respect. Here's a crash course. Good luck.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. But fairies will teach you how to laugh. They will teach you how to love more. They are curious. They will teach you how to have a beginner's mind. They will show you different parts of life. You know, if you show them a two-stemmed carrot or carrot that is grown together, they will laugh their little fairy butts off. That's the most hysterical thing that they could see.
So basically, just kind of lighten up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Don't take so much seriously and enjoy the little tiny, tiny thing.
Again, my guest is Kac Young, and the book is Living the Faery Life. There are instructions in here on what to do and what not to do around fairies. If they give you something to eat, think twice. Wendy's Coffee House. Kac Young, Living the Faery Life. It bears repeating.
Playing with fairies is very fun, and everybody can create a little fairy circle in their garden if they want to. They can just acknowledge fairies. You can even make a fairy door if you want. It is something very beautiful about acknowledging that there is another realm and that we aren't just the end-all and be-all of life, that there's something beyond. And maybe if we let them into our life, we might be enriched ourselves.
Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio, talking fairies, because, you know, why not bring some magic into our reality? I have my own experiences, so I started looking for other people who also had stories. One of the people I found, and this is a DVD from Gary Cook, and he's in New Zealand, and I thought, well, he's really amazing because he had a near-death experience, and it kind of changed his life, and he has a DVD that they believe they actually caught a fairy, and I think you know what I'm talking about, Kac.
I do. I know about Gary Cook. And he's a gardener. First of all, he sets up these wonderful gardens. And the fairies can't resist themselves. They have to be in these magical gardens that he creates.
And see, that's where my experiences have been, in the yard or planting, or, you know, my husband and I were wanting to do elderberries. And we thought, well, we would move and maybe start an elderberry, a whole plot where we could do elderberry jelly and elderberry vinegar and all that good stuff. Here in our yard, out of the blue, the elderberries started, they planted them in a certain spot. We've now got 2 spots, but there were no elderberries around. And all of a sudden they were there. And they've done that with my tomatoes too. I don't like the little small cherry tomatoes. Well, I'll eat them, but they were not my preference. All of a sudden, my yard, I was like 50 of these cherry tomatoes. I'm like, okay, I guess I know who likes these.
Wendy, I have to stop you there because I have a cherry tomato plant story that, I have chills right now. But in Cambria, I planted this cherry tomato thing a long time ago. It's now 11 years old. It completely reseeds itself and relifts. I have cherry tomatoes on it now. It's going on 12 years old. And I moved it myself, and we call it Lazarus. And it is definitely a fairy plant. Yes. Definitely.
Yeah. Oh, it's hilarious. If I pull one or pull 20, they all come right back. And before I got here, there weren't any. And so, I could always say, well, the birds did it. But no. As soon as something goes away, another one comes right back. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to fight it. I understand you guys like these. That's okay. I appreciate that. So once I started saying, it's all right, I will pull some of them because I have some other plants that I would like to grow too. So we have an agreement. But then the elderberries, I knew at that point that there was a contribution being made. And once I realized that we were getting some help, I thought, okay, I'm going to set aside some spots here where we're not interfering and just let it be. But it's, this is an amazing experience that you can't always tell people because, well, we just don't talk about that stuff until I have a book where somebody says, hey, guess what? And I'm like, okay, fine, I'll talk about it now.
Well, and elderberries are their, top favorite tree. They love it. They make elderberry wine, like you said, elderberry jam. And, in the back of the book, I also say maybe you think you are perhaps a fairy. And I even give my friend Anam Karakat wrote a beautiful poem, and that's How to Be a Fairy. And I love people to read that because it tells you how to be a fairy, what it takes to be a fairy. And it is very possible. possible that some of us now living have been fairies in a past life, and we are embodying that spirit. And sometimes all it takes is another fairy like a Helen to remind you of living the fairy life, what it's like to dwell in that state of happiness all the time, and to not get caught up in the negative, and to not worry so much about your life, and to know that you are protected and special and magical. And why not? Why not? If centuries of people have believed in the magic of fairies, then we would do ourselves a great favor to open that channel here and live in that life, in that limelight. It doesn't mean you can't do what you do as a human being, but it also means that your mind and your soul and your heart are in a fairy realm, and that will add nothing but joy and happiness to your life and to that of the people that you are around.
Well, part of this, too, is in your book, you give people the freedom to choose what kind of fairy, what kind of belief system you want to have to bring this out. And I think that helps, too, because you also include angels and say, all right, permission to believe in angels. And we can call them fairies, we can call them angels, but permission to believe in something that has a little bit of an unknown quality, a mystery, a magical element that's positive. And that's how it happens, is when you have this positive influence with no drama, no expectation of something going to trick you, then you get, it's a reciprocal energy that comes back and says, okay, here, you're open, let's play.
Yeah, and you know, the bottom line is it couldn't hurt. It just couldn't hurt to open up a little bit and to allow some of these other thinking and to come into your life. And playing with fairies is very fun. It's very fun. And everybody can create a little fairy circle in their garden if they want to. They can just acknowledge fairies. You can even make a fairy door if you want, or they're online very inexpensively. But it is something very beautiful about acknowledging that there is another realm, and that we aren't just the end-all and be-all of life, that there's something beyond. And maybe if we let them into our life, we might be enriched ourselves.
Yeah. I want to go back to one word. It was respect. That if you demonstrate respect for your own surroundings, for your natural environment, for the animals, for the insects, for everything that has a part in this place where we are, then that's an opening to fairies, because they are persnickety, maybe is the word. They sit back and watch to see how you're going to treat your space, and then, because that's an indication of how you're going to treat them.
Exactly. You know, they are very wise. They are very old. They live to be many, many, many years, and they know how to protect themselves in their world. And that's why they choose places where there's a good vibe around it, and respect and appreciation. And then they'll show up. They'll be there. And whether or not you see them or they appear to you, that's up to you. Once you establish an invitation to the fairy world, then you can develop it as far as you and they will let it go.
All right. You've got 25 books right now, a couple of calendars, one actually for 2022, so you plan ahead. And I'm sure you've got at least 10 books ready to go. What's your next project? You're prolific.
Well, the next project is, again, the fairies brought this to me, magical trees. I'm going to talk about trees, how important they are to us on a very basic human level, and our planet and breathing. And then I'm going to talk about the magic that each tree brings to the world, not only in our culture, but in cultures around the world. So I'm having a wonderful time, and the fairies are helping me.
You betcha. You betcha. I'm sure they have a big part to say in that. Okay. Kac Young, my guest. KacYoung.com. You can check it out again on the website. There's no hiding from this. You are a masterpiece. We know that, but do you? And that's what the fairies would say if you are respecting your space. It's like, wow, like Helen Keller came to you and said, you are so cool. Let me just play along. And, you've had such, I think, wonderful, wonderful examples of this other element that's around us all the time. I'm so glad that you're sharing this and giving people a bigger perspective on what else is here.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for allowing me to add a little bit of joy and happiness to the world.
I'll post links on the blog, wendyscoffeehouse.com. Kac Young, her website, kacyoung.com. Her books are available on Amazon. Just stay curious. It is so amazing to discover for yourself a hidden reality. Thank you for listening.
Since 2013, Bombas has donated over 100 million socks, underwear, and T-shirts to those facing homelessness. If we counted those on air, this ad would last over 1,157 days. But if we counted the time it takes to make a donation possible, it would take just a few clicks. Because every time you make a purchase, Bombas donates an item to someone who needs it.
Go to bombas.com/soft and use code SOFT for 20% off your first purchase. That's bombas.com/soft and use code SOFT.